All right. Want to welcome Farhan Lalji. Sorry about that little stumble there. It's early in the morning. Want to welcome from TSN, joining us to talk about the CFL. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Paul Reed, thanks for bringing me on.
We appreciate it. It's big to have you on here to talk about this thing that's going on. That's kind of blown up our podcast recently. And we just kind of want to, gauge everyone's opinion, basically.
Well, there's certainly a lot of opinion about the XFL and the CFL here in Canada, the necessity for it, at what cost it's going to come. And I'm certainly on the side of it being a good thing. I think they need to explore it. I certainly believe a lot in Redbird and The Rock and Danny Garcia, regardless of what the history of spring football or non-NFL NCAA football has been in the U.S. I just don't believe that because it hasn't worked before that it can never work again. Too many people want to just look at the situation and say it'll never be the NFL. Well, yeah, for sure. It's not going to be the NFL, but it can still be pretty profitable and successful and exciting and new. And I think that's what the Canadian Football League needs.
Yeah, it's crazy right now because we have really two sides to the story. There's the whole merger thing, what's happening. And then now, I mean, even coming out this morning with Naylor's reports and stuff, are we happening this year? I know Arash reported the other day that, April 19th, we might be hearing a postponement. Where are you kind of in your thoughts on everything happening right now with the timeline?
Yeah, Dave and I just finished up and have an update on it. We expect there to be an announcement on the 20th, and that's because the federal budget up here is released on the 19th, and I think there's going to be some wage subsidy clarity, some clarity on programs around wage subsidy and how that might impact the league. So the presidents, the owners, the governors, they're meeting all this week, and I think we're going to get an announcement on the 20th or there shortly thereafter that there is going to be a delay. Do I think the season is going to happen? I absolutely think the season is going to happen. And one of the reasons it's taken this long for the league to basically make that announcement, I think, is because they want to, they don't want to have an open-ended announcement. They don't want to come out and say, okay, well, we're delayed. And that's it. Because I think that's going to create a lot of apathy amongst fans, other stakeholders, and most importantly, players. Because if I'm a player, and look, I've had players texting me saying, what should I do? I've just had a job offer. Should I take it or not? Like, how confident are you that we're going to wind up playing? And I'm confident that we're going to wind up playing. So I think the league wants to be able to say more than simply there's going to be a delay. Now, does that mean they're going to say, absolutely, July 1st, we're starting 100%? No, they can't do that because there is no 100% when it comes to the virus. They're close to getting their safety protocols approved. They've got to get that done. But I think, you might see a bit more of a hard commitment to play. You might see some other targeted dates that, look, we'd like to get started by this date because they've been reluctant to do that. Because if you do that, now all of a sudden you're forced to deal with it and there's more pressure. So I do think we're going to play. I think we're going to get some more clarity on that in the middle of next week. And a lot of work is being done this week to be able to iron out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, because there has been, and what we're trying to do on here is be the most informed that we can. And because I see a lot of people tweeting at us now, other people, well, if they know,
you guys are famous in Canada now. You're a big deal up here now. Both you guys.
After our big duel last week, it was I didn't know, but because there has been if they know it's going to be delayed, why don't they just say it now? But what you're saying is they're trying to get all their ducks in a row on the back end, and that is why they're taking this extra time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the league has been criticized a lot for a lack of communication. And I get it, right? I mean, if I'm a player, I want to know. The challenge is that I think this league on some levels is being held to a bit of a higher standard than some of the other leagues. And I say that because if you look around at the National Hockey League, it was weeks before they started that they said we were starting. You look at the National Football League, the same thing. I mean, we were into training camp period when they finally made their decisions, and they were still going through it. I mean, Major League Baseball, when you look at how close those other leagues were to creating clarity and finality, it was these types of timelines. The difference is that none of those leagues miss time. And I think that the finances, the economics around those leagues are so large, I just don't believe fans at any point thought there was a chance there wouldn't be a season. Whereas now here we missed a season. So I think people are a little more worried. I think the economics of the CFL are a little more fragile and tenuous. So I get why people are concerned. So are you going to get 100% ironclad in the way of a guarantee when they finally make an announcement? No, but I do think they're going to go and offer a little more than simply to say we're delayed, right? Because I don't think that's going to be good for anybody. So could the league be a bit more transparent and communicate more? Yes, but I think because of the fluidity of the virus, it's been difficult to offer guarantees. So they've just chosen not to pin themselves down and back themselves into a corner.
That makes sense. And of course, you touched on it, where the reason why people are feeling the trepidation behind this is because you didn't have a season at all last year. So like, we can't go 2 seasons without this football league. We have to do something. So that makes sense. I wanted to touch on the financing thing. I know it came out that there was a no interest loan denied by the government. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the end of the road, right?
Well, I think in terms of making a decision on playing in 2021, it is the end of the road. Right. And that's not to say government might never help. But, we've known for a while that these two sides have really not stopped talking since last August. And, have they been talking more of late? A little bit more, but not significantly more. And talking to stakeholders around the league, I don't think they've ever felt like in the last few months since cancellation, that 2021 was going to hinge on a government bailout. So, yes, they've been talking. I'm not sure that's really news. And the fact that they're not going to help, I'm not sure is really news, because I don't think the league ever expected it. So could the government step in down the road and offer some additional assistance to what the current wage subsidies that everybody's eligible for, that all businesses could get? Could they potentially get more? It's possible. But this is the same type of ask that was ultimately turned down in August. I mean, the league wanted an interest-free $30 million loan, and many people believe that they were expecting that loan would eventually be forgiven. But, none of that is happening in the short term. So when they go through their process this week and into next week's budget, and then eventually next week's announcement, I don't think any kind of government subsidy is going to factor into those decisions. Now, that said, I do think that there are asks of provincial governments and local governments, right? So, so those governments, I think, which have a bit more of a direct tie into the league, some of them have direct financing arrangements as far as their stadiums are concerned and things of that nature. Do I see teams in constant dialogue with those levels of government asking for some assistance? Yes. Do I think a lot of that's going to come? I do. Do I think it's an equivalent of 30 million? I don't. But I do think there is going to be some government help along the way here to get things moving forward.
And it's definitely not a situation where it's like, government assistance couldn't come with interest attached to it too. That might be on the table.
Yeah, and if you're some businesses, I don't know that you want that, right? I mean, because we do have some large businesses here. So if you are going to take a loan and it's going to be at a rate that's not necessarily favorable than what you could get individually, and so look, I'm certainly of the opinion that when the league asks for these, I do believe that at some point there's a thought that it'll probably be forgiven and the loan essentially will become a grant. And I'm not saying that's how it's been presented, but I do get the sense that, that's kind of the hope, because these business entities, if it was really about a loan bearing interest, they could get that on their own. They don't need the government to sign off on a loan for that.
Well, I appreciate the insights on that, because, we see that come out and it's like, CFL denied loan, right? And people are like, okay, well, that's it, that's it, or that's in line. So, I appreciate the insights on that, because we do try to, spoiler, the title of this episode is going to be like, debunking rumors, this is not clickbait, just because there's been a lot of stuff going on lately. Yeah. So my question for you, assuming we play this year and this goes, whether it's a start in June or July, as someone that covers the league, knowing that this merger is on the back burner, right? It's like Game of Thrones, winter is coming, right? How do you handle that and covering the league as it sits now?
Well, I think there's a lot of different approaches people in the media up here have taken, because, generally as Canadians, we're pretty proud. We don't necessarily, flag wave and go like this the way Americans do, and chant USA, USA all the time. But, and I'm not saying media members in the US do that, but certainly, Americans are more patriotic. But when it comes to the Canadian Football League, I think the media that cover the league are fans of the league, and myself included. We can't deny that. There's a mom and pop nature to this league where it draws us closer to it, and we feel invested in the league's success. Now, what does that investment look like? So some people believe that Canadian football, the rules and traditions are the most important, and they want to defend that, and they want to, be angry at the notion that we could potentially lose some of that. Now, I'm a little bit different. I want a league to cover in 10 years. And I'm a football guy first and foremost, right? So I've coached high school football for 32 years. I'm truly invested in the game. And for me, I want football to be played. And I don't view football as 3 downs or 4 downs or big field or small field or 11 men or 12 men. I view it as blocking and tackling. And I want kids to play this game for a long time. So for me, I don't care if it's 10 downs. I don't care if it's 6 players. Like, I just want football played at a professional level that we can cover and that kids can watch and we can feel, see, and touch. So for me, I do believe from everybody I've talked to, can I sit here and tell you that I've seen the books of the British Columbia Lions, the closest team in my backyards, and looked at their financial statements? I haven't. But I've certainly been around it enough that, in the 90s, I was here when payroll arrived one week in a brown paper bag. Like, I was at the Lions offices when that actually happened. I was there when players used to sprint to the bank the second the checks came because they wanted to make sure their checks cashed. Now, that was 25 years ago. That was a different league. But I've seen the comings and goings enough, as have many of the media that are kind of on the other side of how they want to portray all of this. So I do believe the financial concerns are real. Now, there are people who believe that, it shouldn't be about making money. It should be about the greater good. Well, I just don't think you can legitimately say that to businessmen. Now, we've got 3 community-owned teams here. We've got 6 privately owned teams. If all 9 teams were community-owned, you could make that case that, hey, look, we should just be trying to break even and preserve our cultural institution. I just don't think when you've got people who are wired to make money that you should have that expectation of them. So if they think that this is going to create a much greater revenue stream, I certainly believe it. And it's not that I believe them. It's just that I believe I have a sense of what the economics of the country are and where we're at financially and where the league resonates, because there is a gap in terms of people who are really excited about this league and people who are kind of, they're younger and they've kind of gone past it and they're a little bit tired. And if some of the brand possibilities and gaming possibilities that the XFL can provide are real, then I think you should pursue that. And I don't want like one extra player and one extra down to determine whether or not we pursue that.
That's a fair point. You just touched on it, getting the younger people involved in watching the games and stuff like that. We've discussed it numerous times. I want an app on my phone. I could watch CFL highlights. I want, possibly a subscription service. I don't necessarily have the network that airs CFL games. And I think that's a situation you have to look at. How else can you grow this sport if a merger doesn't happen?
Well, it's a good question, because I think that one of the things Randy Ambrosi, who's the commissioner, came in on was a platform of trying to have a bigger pie, right? We can't try to get a bigger slice of the same pie. We need to grow the pie. And that's why the CFL 2.0 initiative and trying to get global was important. And I don't think the thinking behind that is flawed. You can debate the execution of it. You can debate whether or not we've got enough money to initiate a program like that. But, certainly the governors have bought in. And I think it makes sense that you need to find a way. You've got 3 cultural centers here in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver that are, as international cities, as international a city times 3 as anywhere in the world, right? I mean, you go walk the streets in Vancouver and Montreal and Toronto, it is a complete global melting pot, and in the United States, you go to some places and there are, you can identify it to 3 ethnic backgrounds. You come here and it's everything. Like, it is everything. And so if you can find a way to get fans that are, from a different cultural background to connect and engage with this game, then you do that. If you can find a way to make this league relevant in other parts of the world, then I think you do that. The challenge the CFL is going to have, it's not a flawed premise. It just might be that the NFL might be ahead of him in that area. I mean, I just watched the Florida Pro Day last week, and there were, 4 big-time European athletes that were part of the NFL International Pathways program that came. Even the NFL gets it, that the game's going global, and we need to kind of go in that direction. So I think the thought of trying to create a bigger pie is a good one. I think gambling, and once the legislation gets passed up here to increase that, I think that's a good one. People talk about 3 downs and 4 downs and how kids engage with this game. Here's how kids engage with this game: Madden. I got a 12-year-old son, and he used to. I would take him to the BC Lions practices from the time he was 5 years old. He used to throw footballs with Hall of Famers, right, on the sideline. Like, if ever a kid was engaged with this league, it's that kid. And yet, his heroes are, Patrick Mahomes and others. And yeah, those guys are great players, but like, I think a lot of their engagement is Madden. Now the CFL has looked at trying to, develop a video game, and there's a cost benefit analysis there. And, I just don't think they've been in a position to invest, but there's a number of different ways that you can grow the game. And I think that's what the CFL is looking at when they see Redbird and when they see The Rock, and they just think that some of those entities, forget the XFL. We're talking about the people who are potentially going to own the XFL. Some of the things that they have done, that they just might be farther ahead. They just might be more equipped. And, just they understand how to do it. And I think that's what appeals to the governors up here to try to pursue every opportunity here with collaborating.
Speaking of XFL and ownership and Redbird, we had Arash Madani on last week. Did not have the kindest things to say about XFL. To be mild. What are your thoughts on this? Did you have any past experience? Watching the league back in 2019, 2020, and what are your thoughts in any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, you know what? I was surprised at how it was talked about. Right. So number one. Okay, it's 5 weeks. If you want to take the 5 weeks that ended with COVID and throw it in the scrap heap with every other failed attempt, that's on you. I just want to look at things differently. So when I looked at it, I'll be honest with you, I was that guy that wanted to roll his eyes because I want the CFL to be important and I don't want to lose players to the XFL. I mean, you're going to lose players to the NFL. But when I went into it, I'll be honest, I went into it with a somewhat jaundiced eye, almost kind of expecting, ready, and kind of hoping that, I hope this doesn't work because I want the CFL to be where all the next best coaches and players go to. I don't want to see a talent drain like we see in so many other industries to the second best league in America as opposed to the first best league. I was surprised. And, when people talk about the fact that they didn't get a lot of money on their TV deal, here's what they did get. They got some actual credibility and traction because I watched how that league was covered, and I watched how the ESPN talent covered the league because it was on ESPN, and they viewed it like a legitimate entity. They talked about it like a legitimate entity. It wasn't constantly being talked about like a startup or a freak show or an accident waiting to happen. They talked about it like football. They talked about the players, and I thought, wow, if that continues over time, this is going to matter. So, when my friend Steve Levy is doing play-by-play of the game and he's doing the research and prep before that, he's going to think about those players in that game differently. I read about it in The Athletic, and it was covered like a legitimate entity. And I think those things matter, as you roll that out over time. And really the ratings for the league in week 5 before it went away were good. I'm close to the Seattle market. The fans were into it. And you looked in St. Louis, the fans were into it. Yeah, there were some others where it was bad. I get it. But it's not always going to be about that because if you can build the brand, some of those fans will come. The gambling interest will come. There's other things that can come. And here's my example. MLS, right? Will any kind of CFL-XFL collaboration turn into the NFL? No chance. But look at the MLS, right? MLS might be 5th tier, if that, in terms of worldwide soccer, right? I mean, this is not the Premiership, and it's not close to the Premiership, right? It's not La Liga. It's not, the Serie A. It's not those leagues. It's somewhere down the totem pole, yet it's profitable. Now, the television money the XFL brings in is minimal. The ratings are minimal, but yet they've somehow found a way through all of that with their brand placement and other promotional opportunities in and around that and what TV affords them, that the franchise value around an MLS team is $350 million. You know what the franchise value is for a CFL team? Barely that, right? It's crazy. So you can't look at that and say it's not working as a second tier product, right? Because the product in the CFL is very, very good. People look at the CFL and they think, wow, the haters up here just hate it based on salaries. These guys make 5 to 10% of what an NFL player makes, but they're 90 to 95% as good as an NFL player. So I think it's good. And when I looked at the XFL as an idea, I expected to see XFL 2001, that where Vince McMahon did make it an offshoot of wrestling, and it was stupidity. It wasn't that this time around. So the way the league got talked about, and me viewing it as kind of can it get to an MLS level? I think that's realistic.
You talked about player salaries, and that's been one of the things that we've definitely stuck on is we definitely feel these players deserve a lot more than they're making right now. And we've had discussions where we're talking about the TV deals and stuff like that. I have to put this out there. How do you get a better TV deal for this product and pay the?
Well, you can't in Canada, right? I mean, when the CFL TV deal was signed, it was lauded as a very good television deal here. But now there's a lack of money, so now people want to focus on the television deal. And I get it. I work for the company, so I'm not going to sit here and trash my own employer. That would be smart business, and you guys wouldn't expect that. But the truth is, when that deal was signed, you talk to people around the league, and they thought this is fantastic because now, at the very least, the salary caps are paid for. Like there was enough money coming in that the salary caps for every team was paid for. And that was important. And ultimately, this comes down to economies of scale, right? And you look at where it is relative to, just our size of population. And, I think these things are a reflection of, where we are as a country economically, because I'll tell you, if there were a myriad of networks that wanted to bid and drive the price up, price would have gone up, right? But ultimately, that was what the market bared at that time, and at the time was viewed as a very good deal. And I still think it is, again, relative to
viewership,
the economics around the country and viewership and things like that. I think it's the right number.
I was laughing. I texted Paul here on the private chat. If we didn't have our episode title already, I would have the XFL is not a freak show.
I mean, think about He Hate Me and those things back in 2021, and they would do a race to center field instead of a coin toss. Like that was craziness. The cheerleaders in the hot tub on the sideline, like it was foolishness. At least these guys this time around, they tried to make it a credible product. They did market research. They adjusted rules, some for safety, some for entertainment, but all of it still kept the fundamental credibility of the fact this is football first, right? Oliver Luck didn't go out and try to just, make this a sideshow. It was actual football. So, I thought it was good.
Yeah, you touched on that XFL 2001. I remember there was like a marketing thing they tried where they were like making kind of like an old school wrestling beef between Jesse Ventura and one of the coaches, and it was ridiculous. And I think it turned a lot of people off. Like this is just wrestling with football now at this point. So I'm glad you're bringing that kind of stuff up.
Yeah, it's important. Like I said, the credibility of it mattered. The coaches they got involved mattered. I think the biggest downside to what I saw a year ago at the XFL is I think the quarterback play was really average. I do, but I think it's a more difficult game to quarterback in than the Canadian game, right? And that's been brought up by other journalists here as well because the windows are just so much tighter, right? I mean, the CFL game, when you're throwing that wide side corner ball where you can just kind of put it into a spot, yeah, there's an art to it, but it's a much more forgiving play than trying to, throw a cover two fade ball where it's got to be a low trajectory and you've got to get it there before the safety can get over or the receiver's going to get his head taken off, So I think, being a quarterback in the American game presents its challenges. And I think that the quarterback play in the XFL was kind of ordinary, but I do think that can get better. It was just year one. But beyond that, it was football. I liked what they did with the kickoffs, and moving the players down where they wanted to keep kickoffs in the game, but still wanted to respect the safety element of where special teams were going. There were some creative things that they approached in an analytical way. And, and I think the NFL looked at a lot of that stuff and thought, hey, how can we implement some of this?
I do have to play devil's advocate though on that situation where we look at people that have gone to the NFL from the XFL, and you've got a Taylor Heineke, you've got a PJ. Yeah. So some of those quarterbacks, you say they're ordinary, but they are making NFL rosters, and Taylor Heineke does have a $4 million deal. So that needs to be, that needs to be put.
No, that's fair. Look, and I loved what he did at the end of the season when they needed to go to him, and that's really what it comes down to. And honestly, like Paul, you make a great point, and that. So much of it is timing, right? Mm-hmm. And you see a guy and you give him an opportunity and he's at the right stage in his window. So I know that it was on social media last week about could Bo Levi Mitchell play in the NFL? Yeah, I believe he could. Now, could Bo be a starter? No, but do I think Bo is one of the top 50 quarterbacks in the world? Yeah, I do. But you're not going to take a quarterback that's in his late 20s or early 30s and invest and give him a big opportunity down there. That's just not how that league is wired. So we see players from this league in the CFL all the time. And I know your point was quarterbacks, but my point around Taylor Heineke was timing, right? And it just kind of takes that one guy to believe in you in the right time. Who's the quarterback in with the Rams that finished the season for them? That Sean McVay really
Wolford.
What's that?
John Wolford.
Yeah, John Wolford. Well, all of a sudden, one guy liked him, and it was the right timing, and he was at the right stage in his career. We get guys that get cut from CFL rosters all the time that in August just happen to be available, and an NFL team has a need, and they bring that guy in, and he got cut from a CFL team, right? So much of it is about timing and where you're at in your career. A lot of these CFL guys don't become special until their late 20s and early, maybe 30, and now it's too late, right? So even though when you look at them on the whole, are they better than that NFL rookie today? Probably, but that doesn't mean they fit the NFL profile and that an NFL team wants to invest in them at that time.
My last question for you today, and I would hope that we could maybe get you on here in the future, depending on how all this.
As long as you don't get me fired, we can do it. Yeah.
We will, as long as you don't. Call our jerseys moldy. Whatever Arash said. My last question for you, honestly, a friend of the show, Rob Peterson, was on his program yesterday. He feels 60-40. The CFL is not going to play this year, right? Where you're sitting now, how do you feel, optimistically or not, about them getting through this season?
I think there's a 95% chance the CFL will play this year. And I'd say higher. Just from the conversations I've had in the last couple of days, I think there's absolutely going to be a season. Everybody understands what's at stake. I think they're going to find a way to play.
I hope so. I mean, this has been great for everybody. So we're all steam ahead. So there's certainly no dissenting views from anybody trying to cover this. So.
Well, yeah, it's a fun league, and I missed it last year, and I'm glad, if nothing else, that it's just being talked about right now, and hopefully a few more American fans that were somewhat interested in the XFL before will kind of look at this for a period of time and say, hey, yeah, you know what, maybe this is where we're going, and it's been around a long time, and I think the credibility of the CFL is one of the reasons the XFL wants to get involved with it. So you got to play this year if you want that credibility to remain intact.
Completely agree. Farhan Lalji, thank you for joining us right here on the XFL Markcast. We appreciate it. We're probably going to rename the show the CFL Markcast, the way we keep talking about this thing. So we appreciate your time, and it's been an honor to speak with you about this.
All right, Paul, Reed, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe.